The bulldozers roared across his land. 96 luxury homes rose where his father once planted crops, and the man behind it all thought he'd gotten away with stealing it. But he didn't know the quiet rancher watching from the hill was the real owner, and he was letting them finish construction on purpose. 2 years later, in a packed courtroom, that same man pulled out a single sheet of paper, the original deed, and what happened next left the entire HOA begging for mercy. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. For decades, Thomas had lived a simple life. He was the kind of man who kept his word, kept his property clean, and kept his peace. His ranch sat on over 100 acres of green land that had been passed down from his father. It wasn't flashy, but it was his pride and his promise. When his father passed away, the land became the last living piece of his family's name.
Thomas knew every inch of it, every fence post, every oak tree that lined the edge of his property. He never thought that one day someone else would try to claim it. But as the town grew, so did the hunger for money. New highways brought developers, and soon the quiet outskirts turned into prime real estate. Realtors began knocking on doors, flashing big checks and big promises.
One of them came to Thomas one warm afternoon. "Mr. Reed," the man said with a slick smile, "we represent the Brookstone Hills Homeowners Association. They're looking to expand their luxury community. We'd like to buy your land. You could retire today. You could retire today." Thomas didn't even let him finish. "My land's not for sale," he said calmly, shutting the door. He thought that was the end of it. But greed doesn't take no for an answer. Weeks later, Thomas noticed strange markings on the far side of his property. Stakes in the ground. Orange tape tied to trees. Then, one morning, the rumble of engines shook the floor of his house. He rushed outside and saw something that made his blood boil. Bulldozers, cranes, and construction workers digging trenches right into his land. He sped down the hill in his pickup truck and slammed the brakes in front of them. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted. The foreman looked up from his clipboard, unimpressed. "Sir, this HOA property. You're trespassing." "Trespassing," Thomas repeated in disbelief. "I've lived here my whole life. My father built that fence with his own hands." The man shrugged. "Take it up with the county. We've got permits." Thomas drove straight to the sheriff's office, furious. But when he showed his papers, the sheriff frowned. "According to county records, this land was sold last year. Belongs to Brookstone Hills now." Thomas's voice shook. "That's impossible. I never sold it." "Then you'll need to prove it," the sheriff said, almost apologetically. That night, Thomas sat alone at his kitchen table. The only light came from a dusty lamp flickering over piles of old documents, tax receipts, maps, and most importantly, the original deed signed by his father in 1982. His heart pounded as he looked through every page. He found no errors, no sales, no transfers. Someone had forged paperwork to erase him. But Thomas wasn't the type to yell or fight in the street. He was patient, quiet, calculated. He decided to wait. Let them build. Let them pour their millions into his soil. Because when the time came, he'd take it all back legally. Over the next 2 years, he watched from a distance as the HOA transformed his fields into a glittering new neighborhood. 96 luxury homes rose from the ground, complete with driveways, white fences, manicured lawns, and fancy street signs. Families moved in, smiling, waving at each other, never realizing they were living on borrowed land. Sometimes, neighbors would see an old man in a faded hat sitting in his truck at the edge of the development, just watching. They thought he was some bitter farmer refusing to move on. None of them knew the truth. One morning, Thomas put on a clean shirt, polished his old boots, and drove into town. He parked in front of the courthouse, holding a worn leather folder under his arm. Inside was his father's deed, the one piece of paper that could change everything. He filed a quiet lawsuit against the Brookstone Hills HOA and the county registrar, claiming unlawful seizure and fraudulent land transfer. When the HOA board received the notice, they laughed. Their lawyer told the media, "It's a simple mix-up. This man's confused. There's no way one person can own an entire neighborhood." When the first hearing began, Thomas stood alone in the courtroom. Across from him sat a table full of HOA lawyers, board members, and the county representative. The judge reviewed the file in silence, flipping through old pages until she reached the deed. The paper was yellowed and fragile, but the ink was clear. The name Thomas Reed shone under the court lights. "Mr. Reed," the judge said, "this document appears to be authentic. Where did you obtain it?" Thomas stood tall. "It's been in my family for over 40 years, Your Honor. Never sold. Never signed away." The courtroom buzzed. The judge called for verification.
County investigators dug into the archives, and within hours, they uncovered the truth. Someone had indeed tampered with the digital land records. The HOA's claim was forged. The real owner was Thomas Reed. The next moment was pure silence. The HOA president turned ghost white. Their attorney whispered frantically, and for the first time in 2 years, Thomas smiled.
The judge's gavel hit the desk. The land in question legally belongs to Mr. Reed. The HO and the county will face restitution and penalties for fraud. The media exploded with the story. Rancher wins back entire HOA neighborhood. News vans parked outside the subdivision, interviewing shocked homeowners who had no idea they'd built their dream houses on someone else's land. The HOA tried to strike a deal. They offered Thomas millions to settle. He declined. "I'm not selling what's already mine," he said in a calm, steady voice. The court's final order left the HOA with two choices: buy the land from Thomas at full market value or vacate it. But the HOA didn't have that kind of money. 96 homes, all sitting on his soil, suddenly had no legal foundation. Weeks later, Thomas made an announcement that stunned everyone. He told the homeowners, "You can stay here. I'm not throwing families out, but from this day forward, you'll pay rent directly to me." He turned their arrogance into his quiet triumph. The same people who once built over his property without permission were now his tenants. The HO went bankrupt within months. The corrupt official who had falsified the documents was arrested.
And Thomas, the man they thought was just an old farmer, became the owner of one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the county.
When reporters asked him why he didn't stop them sooner, Thomas simply said, "If I had, they'd call it a mistake. But this way, no one can deny the truth." He never bragged or boasted. He just went back to his ranch, parked his truck, and watched the sun set over his land that had been stolen and reclaimed without a single shout, only patience and proof. Years later, new families moved in, and they treated him with respect. Some called him Mr. Reed, the landlord. Others called him the man who beat the system. But to Thomas, he was just the keeper of his father's promise. On the wall of his small wooden house, hanging above the fireplace, was the framed piece of paper that changed everything, the deed to his land. The same one they tried to erase, the same one that, in the end, erased them. And that's how patience turned into the ultimate revenge. He didn't raise his voice, he raised the deed, and the whole neighborhood paid the price. Thanks for watching, and if this story amazed you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories from Black visionaries.